Alright, hello everyone, welcome back to our regular scheduled classes and our regular scheduled lessons. So we're going to start our next unit this week and today on about the road to World War II. So our first lesson today is how peace was threatened by dictators. So our objectives and standards. Objectives summarize the characteristics, of a totalitarian state, analyze the factors that led to the rise of Mussolini, and explain the key ideas and goals of Hitler during the period. And take a moment there to read over the standards there if you would, please. And our desired result, how did dictators come to power after World War I? So we're going to talk about a few dictators that come to power following the First World War in the 1920s and 1930s. And we'll see how the rise of these dictators is going to impact how World War II will come about. So let's talk about Russia, a new government in Russia. After World War I, Russia will become the Soviet Union after the Russian Revolution, and they established a communist government under this gentleman right here. His name is Vladimir Lenin. Now, Lenin is going to die in 1924. When Lenin died, one of his kind of followers and a strong person of power in the Communist Party was Joseph Stalin, this man right here. And Joseph Stalin is going to take control of the country, of the Soviet Union, and he's determined to make the Soviet Union a strong industrial country. Now, like we said, because he's so determined, Stalin wanted to build a strong country that was based on both agriculture and industry. So what he does is he abolishes private rights to farms and formed large government-run farms known as collectives. Okay, so he basically, so if you owned your own private farm, it now belongs to the government. It doesn't belong to you anymore. And these collective farms are going to be worked by hundreds of families. Stalin also put all the economic activity under government control. And through his actions, Stalin's going to create the second strongest industrial country in the world at the time. Now, there's going to be a lot of things that happen in the Soviet Union that are going to cause people to be very fearful of Stalin. Stalin was not afraid to use his power to get rid of anyone who disagreed with him or anyone who stood in his way. It's estimated that he is responsible for the deaths of 8 to 13 million people. 8 to 13 million people, mostly through famine. Again, famine is like hunger, starvation. A lot of this is going to be due to the fact that people are working on these huge farms, and these huge farms are producing large amounts of food, but the food isn't going to these people who work the farms, it's going to the government, which then divvies it up and divides it up among people. So people aren't really getting a fair chance at the food. Also, under his totalitarian regime, his totalitarian reign, people had no rights, and the government controlled most of their lives of what they said, what they did, what they thought, and things like that. Let's talk about Italy. So fascism in Italy. Benito Mussolini, he had been a newspaper editor and things like that, and he was working to establish a similar type of government in Italy at the same time. So something like a very totalitarian dictatorship in Italy. Now, the reason that he's going to be able to do this is because of a few things. There's unemployment in Italy, there are labor strikes in Italy, and also the fear of communism in Italy is widespread across the country. And Italy, again, kind of suffering from World War I, people are going to begin to demand a strong leader, and Mussolini, again, steps up and seizes this opportunity to build off their fears and take control of the government. In 1921, Mussolini is going to establish the Fascist Party. Now, he and his party believed in nationalism, so that your country is the best and everybody else's country stinks, and putting the country above individuals. So what we mean by this is saying, that your freedoms and your liberties are not as important as building a strong country. So people were told to pretty much put aside their own personal freedoms and personal views in order to support the country. In 1922, Mussolini and his supporters, which were known as the Black Shirts for their uniforms that they wore, they marched on Rome. And when they marched on Rome, the Italian king, their people are very fearful of this. The Italian king decides to name him the leader of the government. There's a picture of Mussolini there. Hitler. I'm sure maybe some of you know about Hitler or have learned about Hitler previously, but Adolf Hitler joined the Nationalist Socialist Worker Party, better known as the Nazi Party, in 1919. Hitler is was a very powerful speaker, quickly gains a lot of attention, a lot of fame, a lot of support, and he quickly becomes the leader of the Nazi Party. Many of his ideas represented extreme nationalism, such as, Germany becoming the greatest country on earth and, expanding and rebuilding this German empire that Hitler believed that they should rebuild. And he has his own kind of brand of fascist ideas as well, which we'll take a look at here. So the goals of Hitler. Hitler had the dream of uniting all German-speaking people in a great empire. So this could be people in Austria, this could be people in Hungary, this could be people in Belgium. Wherever there were German-speaking people, Hitler believed that he should unite them into one giant empire. Speaking of giant empires, he also believed that the Germans were meant to rule the world and that the Germans were a perfect race. Maybe you've heard this before, that, Hitler believed in the blue-eyed, blonde-haired German, that was the perfect type of person, and that's what they should go for. That's their goal, to make a perfect race, are these blue-eyed, blonde-haired people. He also had views and policies of racism, especially of those who were Jewish. Many of his policies were extreme. We'll talk more about that when we talk about the Holocaust a little bit later on, and the persecution of the Jewish and others, such as, them having to wear the Star of David, having to live in ghettos, and eventually Hitler has the goal to exterminate and wipe out the Jewish race. But again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But Hitler also wanted to expand German territory as well. Again, building this second great German empire that was going to rule the world. How did Hitler come to power? Well, after World War I, as we know, Germany faced very difficult times. Again, unemployment, very little money. People were, angry and frustrated, about how they had been treated following World War I. And this was due in part to the Treaty of Versailles. Remember, the Treaty of Versailles stated that Germany was at fault for World War I, and it put a lot of harsh punishments on Germany for World War I. So many people in Germany are suffering because of this treaty. Hitler then steps in and he uses the frustrations of people to build support for himself and the Nazi Party. So he basically says, hey, listen, what happened during the Treaty of Versailles, was unfair, and, I have the answer. Follow me, follow my policies, follow my beliefs, and I'll make Germany a strong country again. And it works. People of all backgrounds in Germany pretty much begin to follow this man. Old, young, rich, poor, many people begin to follow Hitler because they want to make Germany a strong country again. Finally, in 1933, Hitler will be named the Chancellor of Germany, and eventually he will completely dismantle the democratic government in Germany and become a dictator. Here's a picture of Hitler. Again, you may or may not have seen his face before, but there is Adolf Hitler there. So Japanese aggression. There were also militaristic individuals who were trying to take control in Japan during this time. Many of these people in Japan who had this very aggressive policies, they're looking to expand their territory because Japan is having a rising population during this time, and Japan wants some more resources, they want some more land. So in 1931, Japanese militarists are going to invade Manchuria. Manchuria was a province of China, and the capture of this Chinese territory allowed for stronger military policies in Japan. Now, you might be saying, well, what is the world doing to, try and stop these dictators from what they're doing? Well, the League of Nations is going to take some action and respond to what's going on here. The League of Nations, as part of its creation, was supposed to prevent aggression by countries. Representatives from the League of Nations did condemn the actions of Japan, but when they did this, Japan says, okay, we quit, and they quit the organization. Soon after that, Hitler pulls Germany out of the organization and begins to build a stronger military for Germany after leaving the organization. Now, the League of Nations is going to have a failure to stop dictators. Hitler then invaded the Rhineland, which was an area bordering France and Belgium that was supposed to remain demilitarized, so kind of like a neutral area. And the League of Nations does nothing to stop him. They pretty much kind of shake their finger at him and, like their index finger at him and say, no, no, don't do that again. And Hitler says, oh, okay, I won't do it again. But eventually, as you'll see later on too, Hitler is not going to stop invading places. Also, Mussolini from Italy invaded Ethiopia and also faced very little consequences from the League of Nations. So again, the League of Nations, again, doesn't really have any power or authority to stop what's going on. So they're kind of just giving Italy and Japan and Germany warning after warning after warning about not doing things, and they just don't listen. Also, there's another country that kind of comes into play here in terms of dictators, Spanish fascism. So in Spain, there was a group of military Spanish officers who were led by that gentleman right there, General Franco, who are going to rebel against the government. And then we're going to have the Spanish Civil War begin. We're going to have those who supported Franco and those who supported the government go to war. And people from around the world are going to take interest in the struggle, including people like Hitler and Mussolini, who are going to support Franco and his kind of fascist views, his fascist policies. Also during this time, Hitler and Mussolini are going to form their own alliance, and this will become known as the Rome-Berlin Axis, and this will be a very key part of their alliance as we go into World War II. After a couple of years, in 1939, finally Franco will and his supporters will win the Spanish War, and Franco will become a fascist dictator, and he'll be there for about 40 years or so as a fascist dictator. Alright, so that's kind of the rise of dictators and how dictators are kind of threatening peace at this time in the 1920s and 30s. Please try your best on the questions that are here. Be sure to respond to the anticipatory question and the desired result. And of course the questions in between. And hopefully I'll see and talk to you guys soon.